participants, dear colleagues, wish you a very good morning, all. Good afternoon or evening, depending, of course, on your time zone. And my name is Dominique Burgeon, and I am the director of the FAO Liaison Office with the UN in Geneva. And I will be moderating today's session. We are on the last day of what has been a very rich World Food Forum, and I would like to welcome you all, wherever you are, to our side event on young parliamentarians and young actors of the food systems, where parliamentarians and actors of the food systems will have the opportunity to share their vision for a better future and, of course, ultimately contributing to a better world. As presented in the 2021 edition of the State of Food Security and Nutrition, the annual flagship publication prepared by FAO, together with IFAD, UNICEF, WFP, and WHO, it is clear that the world is not on track to achieve its goal of ending hunger and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030. Conflict, climate shocks and extremes, and economic shocks, in addition, of course, to the impact of COVID-19, continue to increase the number of people facing hunger and food insecurity. Engaging individuals and institutions at all levels, particularly youth, who will inherit these challenges in the future, is essential for actionable, innovative, and inclusive solutions to address the unprecedented challenges and transform agri-food systems to make them more efficient, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. Before I start the formal proceeding, please allow me to introduce some housekeeping, logistical, technical information for this virtual session. Of course, realizing that you heard this 100 times, but still there are from time to time some peculiarities in this meeting. So first, please note that this webinar will be recorded and will be available later on our website. Second, please note that only the speakers, panelists, will appear on screen. Third, in order to optimize the use of time in our discussion, we will circulate the bios of the speaker and panelists in the chat box at the time they speak. So it means that I will only use a short version of this bio when giving the floor to our speakers and panelists. Fourth, this meeting will be in English only with no interpretation. Lastly, and in the interest of time, questions can be asked only by using the Q&A box, which you can see below in the screen. We will aim, of course, to address as many questions as possible. We will, however, if we are not able to answer all of them, we will endeavor to get back to you and engage with the panelists. So in our session today, we are extremely honored to have as a keynote speaker, Mr. Maximo Torero, the FAO Chief Economist. Maximo, you are most welcome. Then we will have remarks by Ambassador Felix Baumann, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations Office in Geneva. Welcome, Ambassador. Following, we will alternate interventions by actors of food system chains and young parliamentarians in the following order. We'll have Ms. Louise Mabulo from the Cacao Project, the Honorable Fabian Molina, parliamentarian from Switzerland, Mr. Olivier Flamand-Lapointe from the Graduate Institute Student Association, the Honorable Nima Luganjira from the Parliament of Tanzania, Mr. Olivier Flamand-Lapointe from and Miss Perotti from Bites of Transformation. And then we'll have, of course, Mr. Kazuki Kitaoka and Miss Emma Restano from the organization of the World Food Forum will give us an update on the main events in these last few days. We'll then open the floor for Q&A, and then afterwards we'll have closing remarks that will be made by Ms. Marcella Villarreal, the Director of the FAO Partnership and UN Collaboration Division. So let us go straight now in the keynote address, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to Mr. Maximo Torero-Cullen, the FAO chief economist. He joined the organization in 2019 as Assistant Director General for the Economic and Social Development Department. And prior to joining FAO, Maximo was with the World Bank, covering a number of countries, and with the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI. Maximo has a long research experience, including on poverty, inequality, and technology. So we have a lot to learn from Maximo, as always. And Maximo, you recently spoke on transforming agri-food systems to achieve SDG 2 and minimize trade-offs. And after addressing global challenges for agri-food system and trade-offs and synergies using an agri-food system approach, you underscore cooperation, governance, and new arrangements to achieve results. In this regard, common efforts and collaboration would be on the order of the day, including in terms of parliamentarians having an important role as agent of change. They are, you said, fundamental custodians of political commitments. We would like to hear more from you on this subject, specifically applied to young parliamentarians and young actors of the food systems. Maximo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dominique, and it's a pleasure to be here. So good morning and good afternoon to all. I'm happy to join the World Food Forum in this side event on young parliamentarians and young actors of the food system change. You, the youth, in your different roles as parliamentarians, agricultural producers, workers, agripreneurs, in the food systems, consumers, as well as citizens, play a precious role, as I have mentioned before, and we should urgently support what is happening and work together. The idea here is to enable the environment and skills so that you can effectively contribute to the inclusive development and to a recovery process that has to build back better in a more inclusive, fair, resilient, and sustainable way. So as Dominic mentioned, the challenges we had today are enormous, and that's something that we need clearly to focus. So I hope you can see my screen. I will do a brief presentation, but I think it's important to bring some elements into the discussion that could help what we're trying to do. So why are youth a priority group? Well, demographic factors speak for themselves. Young people between 15 and 24 has reached an unprecedented figure of 1.21 billion and account for 15.5% of the global population. Almost 85% live in developing regions of Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and many of them in rural areas. Beyond demographics, youth continue to face higher vulnerability. They are overrepresented among the working poor, close to 70% in Sub-Saharan Africa, 54% in South Asia. They are 3 times more likely than adults to be unemployed, a huge challenge, with a global youth unemployment rate of 13.6%, corresponding to 70 million youth. Also, 1/5 of young people are not in employment, education, or training, especially young women. When young women and men do find employment, quality remains a concern. In emerging and developing countries, 17% of young workers between 15 and 24 are working poor. In Sub-Saharan Africa alone, nearly 67% of the employed youth population live in conditions of poverty. This is partially due to the fact that youth often start their working lives in the informal economy, in casual occupations with low remunerations and out of necessity. And we know that people that were in the informal sector during the COVID pandemic were the mostly affected because they were not getting any of the benefits from governments on the support of the activities they were doing. And many of them that were not necessarily poor because they earn an income informally, they had to deplete their savings and their capital of work and move them into poverty and extreme poverty. So why bring them to the debate? Bringing them to the debate is, of course, is crucial because youth are definitely a priority group for development interventions due to the just mentioned demographic and vulnerability concerns. And it's not only the only reason why engaging them and bringing them to the debate around food security and food system transformation, agri-food system transformation. Youth are key agents of change with enormous innovations and potential. And we have been seeing during the last days since the opening of the World Food Forum, their activity and the energy that they have put in place, which goes back to more than a year of work, and how they can touch innovation changes that are so important. Even as flagged in the recent CFS HLP 2021 report promoting youth engagement and employment in agriculture and food systems, youth already are on the front lines to build the food systems of the future, while also bearing significant risks from climate change, social and economic inequities, and political marginalization. Young women and men are best placed to rejuvenate the sector, acquire the knowledge and the skills needed to innovate, uptake new technologies, and spearhead the digital transformation. They can drive change and ensure transition to more sustainable production and consumption patterns that are needed to achieve SDGs and feed the world. For us, they are also catalysts of upward intergenerational mobility and change of behavior. They can be the translators and the bridge to inform their parents and all the generations of the change that needs to be done in terms of behavior. We know that works. And I think the bigger challenge is how we can work together to create that transformation. So they could play a crucial role in the change that we're trying to do. On the occasion of the International Youth Day of 2021, on the topic of transforming agri-food systems, youth innovation for human and planetary health, FAO and the major group of children and youth work in collaboration with UN DESA on a global survey to report on youth perspectives related to issues pertaining to nutrition, food security, environmental sustainability, food consumption habits within others. An interesting finding of the survey is that the youth do pay attention to the food they are eating, as well as environmental sustainability. They are informed consumers, if often they find challenging and costly to buy better and healthier food. 75% of youth think that eating healthy is expensive and that accessing healthy food is difficult. 98% of youth are influenced by environmental sustainability when buying food. And this is clearly reflected in that today 3 billion people don't have access to healthy diets. And also that we're facing significant challenges on our environment. 74% of youth choose food according to both calories and healthy properties. 73.2% of respondents indicate that they have changed their dietary habits during the pandemic, and 59% increased their consumption of nutritious food. So again, it's more information to allow us to understand how they can be changes of behavior and how they can transfer this to the previous and the upper generations. Young people, young agripreneurs, young informal workers, and young women have been particularly vulnerable to the impacts of disruption caused by the pandemic. The disruptions exacerbated youth pre-existing challenges, notably limiting access to productive resources, advisory and financial services, and training markets and information. And that's because the level of informality they face. In many of our developing countries, the informality goes up to 70%, 50%, depending on the country, and youth are part of that informality. Despite this, youth have been actively responding to the challenge, introducing innovations and contributing to the debate about more sustainable agri-food systems. It is our responsibility to empower and support and to work with them to enable an environment where they can thrive. In particular, COVID-19 triggered youth into adopting new learning and business models that shifted from analog to digital. And they have more capabilities for digital technologies that we will normally have older generations, and that's why we need to profit from them and take advantage of those capabilities. Youth are already raising their voices and participating in several fora at country, regional, and global level. Yet they demand and need additional support. It is about time we talk about and include youth as equals in the formulation and implementation of rural transformation policies and programs that are tailored to the challenges they face. This is not just about giving youth a seat at the table. It's not just giving youth a responsibility. This implies removing barriers to youth leadership in cooperatives, farmer unions, worker associations, as well as in AFS government mechanisms. Not surprisingly, youth engagement was a key theme in the UN Food System Summit dialogues. 68 dialogues were on this topic. Youth voices are loud and powerful and need to be heard. And the WFF is basically a follow-up to this summit. It's a new idea, it's a new movement that we want to empower and that can plug into the process of the follow-up of the summit. Youth already presented key recommendations for engagement in different fora, independent dialogues, and side events. An example is the recent UN Food System Summit Independent Dialogues, the Y Factor, bringing rural youth in conversation about the inclusive and sustainable agri-food systems, convened through the African Youth Agripreneurs platform and supported by FAO, WFF, and AGRA. Most common requests emerging from these dialogues can be synthesized as following: facilitation, empowerment, and a seat of the policy-making table. Skills to close the capacity gap among youth venturing into agriculture. support for productive engagement in terms of accessing assets and finance, networking opportunities that enable peer-to-peer learning and access to information, and gender equality and dedicated support for young women and other youth groups. Now, this is not easy. This will be complex. Just think about access to finance. What we are talking here is that the scoring mechanisms will allow from the financial system to put a weight in favor of young generations, to minimize their automatic discrimination out of the financial system because of the youthfulness, because how young they are. But that needs to bring evidence around it. We need to work with the banks, we need to work with the financial system to assure that that doesn't mean that they are more risky like traditionally we used to think. So in each of these topics, we need to think carefully how we can create this change, because at the end of the line, it's not just sitting in a table to discuss policies, also acting and having results so that we can really empower and we can really make a change and attract back to agriculture and to rural areas the youth, which is so important and which today is not there and which we need them. That's the important thing. We need them as game changers because we need them as a way to create this bridge that I was referring before, to minimize the capabilities constraint that we have in rural areas right now because of the illiteracy levels that we have. We need them to use digital technologies because they are more prepared to do that, and to find ways in which we can work together across generations to create the change that we're looking for. Parliamentarians are fundamental custodians of political commitments. Their youth voices can be powerful. Yet, the 7th Global Conference of Young Parliamentarians on Post-COVID-19 Recovery stressed youth underrepresentation in parliaments, where only 2.6% of the world's MPs are under 30. She also dedicated call to action on young women parliamentarians. Young women are the least represented in leadership positions in the Parliamentarian Union. Data on youth participation in parliaments show that less than 1% are young women parliamentarians. FAO supports the need for enhancing youth participation and leadership in parliaments and policy mechanisms and overall youth responsive mechanisms. The Frente Parlamentario Juvenil of Ecuador, SINAMBRE, launched in 2019, it is an initiative of the Asamblea Juvenil de Ecuador, established in 2017 with the objective to engage youth in legislation work. These are good examples and initiatives. The FAO Legislative Advisory Group of Philippines, the FLAG-PH, aims to raise awareness among concerned stakeholders of essential legislation related to poverty reduction and food security and nutrition. The principals composed of legislator and FAO determine the need of legislative actions, whether it will be drafting and passage of new bills or amendments of existing laws. Since its launch in January 2018, the FLAG-PH has been serving as a platform for exchange of ideas and as a node between parliamentarians and ordinary farmers and fisher folks. A dedicated FLAG youth was established recently, actively engaging young parliamentarians and leadership to congressional deliberations on essential pieces of legislation targeting youth, such as the House Bill establishment, the Young Farmers Challenge program, as well as capacity building initiatives for strengthening youth policy advocacy in Bangsamoro region. Youth engagement is also a growing priority for FAO. The Youth Committee, which was launched in September 2019, a FAO internal body, for sharing experiences and innovative ideas from FAO young workers. And this has been the motor of action which empower the World Food Forum and this movement of youth that we're doing, which is broad and have many agencies, UN agencies, and also outside of the UN, including private sector, civil society, and educational and university groups. On Rural Youth Action Plan, developed in 2020 under the aegis of the COAC in consultation with member countries, multiple UN agencies and youth networks, example, the Mayor Group of Children and Youth, and the Young Professionals for Agricultural Development and the RYAP, is now embedded in FAO's medium-term plan and will monitor youth-specific activities. On IN New York Day, the UN ANYD was established by the DESA in 2010 and has 3 co-chairs: DESA as a permanent co-chair, 1 UN entity as rotating co-chair, and 1 rotating youth co-chair through the UN IANYD Youth Caucasus. The network supports relevant interagency initiatives, including the implementation of the UN strategy on youth, and FAO has been contributing members since 2012. On ECOSOC, the Youth Forum, FAO collaborates in the organization of a large-scale events such as the yearly ECOSOC Youth Forum, and facilitates the dialogue with youth while bringing rural youth concerns at the ECOSOC to inform HLPF. On Decent Jobs for Youth, a global initiative, it is the first UN system-wide effort for the promotion of youth employment. The initiative is ILO-led, and FAO jointly leads with the ILO the thematic area of youth in the rural economy. Annual conferences are organized where young entrepreneurs are invited to discuss and bring their innovation business ideas. And finally, the World Food Forum. It's an independent global network of partners created for and led by the youth, facilitated by FAO, to transform global agri-food system and achieve SDGs. And this is a movement that I think will incorporate and fit all the other initiatives that I have been talking about. And we hope that this movement will continue over time and it will get this life. And today, which is the closing of the World Food Forum, the Youth Assembly will present a report of their activities and the actions that they want to follow. In closing, let me allow you to tell that overall, it will be a key for governments and development partners to nurture and enable the innovative capacity of youth and provide adequate response measures that are shaped with youth active contribution and therefore targeted to their needs. We need to work together, and we need to find ways in which we can optimize the way we can work to optimize and transform our agri-food systems. It's essential that we include the youth today to achieve the challenges that we are facing. We want their energy, we want their innovativeness, we want them to be bridges working with us to create the transformation that we're looking for. Thank you very much, Dominic. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Maximo. I mean, you said it all. Youth are key agent of change. Youth are on the front line to transform the agri-food system. They are catalysts, they are bridges to transform. They've been facing particular vulnerabilities over the last period, especially during COVID, but they have been very responsive. They have been innovative. And now it's about really how can we empower them? How can we enable the environment and the skills for them to indeed, I would say, unleash their potential. And I think a lot of that will come in the conversation today. And with this mix of active actors in the system, as well as very active young parliamentarians, I think it will be very interesting to hear from all of them. I forgot to say something important at the outset, is that this event is also broadcasted live on the FAO website. So it is webcasted live and it can be seen by a very large number of people. So let me now move to the next speaker. And actually our introductory remarks this morning will be given by Ambassador Felix Baumann, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the UN and the other organizations, international organization in Geneva, and the Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the Conference on Disarmament. During his career, Ambassador Baumann was Consul General of Switzerland in Milan and Chief of Staff at the Directorate for Resource of the FDFA, responsible for the strategic management of the network of Swiss diplomatic representation abroad. We are delighted to have Ambassador Baumann with us this morning, and I would like to give you the floor, sir, for your introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Burgeon, cher Dominique. Thank you for these kind words. And well, good morning to everyone, dear members of Parliament, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure for me to be with you today and to be able to deliver some very brief welcoming remarks. First of all, on the behalf of the Swiss government, let me thank FAO for this virtual, but nevertheless Geneva-based youth event in the context of the World Food Forum and the UN Food Systems Summit 2021. So the UN Food Systems Summit, which took place 2 weeks ago, confirmed that the vast majority of countries now recognize the need to transform our food systems. Why? Why? Because on a global scale, hunger is persisting despite significant productivity increases. But food systems are responsible for a large part of biodiversity loss and greenhouse gas emissions. And micronutrient deficiencies, as well as obesity-related diseases, are on the rise. But despite these enormous challenges, there are solutions. Solutions exist. Transforming food systems towards more sustainability offers us a real opportunity to contribute to the implementation of the 2030 agenda. So, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Torero just said before, this transformative change is only possible if it engages young women and men, or as he stated on his last slide, we cannot build a better future for tomorrow without including the youth of today. And as Dominic said just before, it is about to engage young people, and Switzerland in this context over the years has helped, or has tried to help to raise awareness on youth as important actors and agents of change within the multilateral context. And this for example, in the Rome-based agencies, in the Committee of World Food Security, but also obviously in many other international forums. And let me name just two specific examples related on our today's topic. The Swiss National FAO Committee, which is a consultative body of our government, the Federal Council, for questions relating to food security and sustainable food systems, collaborated or cooperated with FAO on a series of multi-stakeholder capacity assessments with a focus on what is needed precisely to motivate young people for agriculture and what it takes for them to successfully establish themselves in the sector. And then the second example is the project that Mr. Bourgeon mentioned at the beginning, the Bites of Transformation, brought together, which brought together a group of diverse young individuals that co-established or co-created together a unifying vision of the future of food systems and thus of society as a whole in the form of a manifesto. And the group stated that the time is ready to build a new society through the perspective of food. The group believes in the unifying power of food to shape cohesive and sustainable societies. So therefore, we as Switzerland are very pleased to see that young women and men are put more and more at the center when it comes to the transformative actions needed towards sustainable food systems. And the World Food Forum, aiming to be the global event for the future of our food systems by gathering major youth leaders. The forum is indeed an inspiring example for this greater attention, and so let me really congratulate the FAO and the Youth Committee for their excellent organization. Ladies and gentlemen, despite these positive developments, there remain a certain number of challenges. Around the world, few young people see a future for themselves in agriculture. If we take Africa, for example, the average age of farmers is about 60. At the same time, 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 24. And in Europe, of the 12 million farmers, only 6% are below the age of 35. And that's also the case for Switzerland, where farmers are getting older. More than half of Swiss farm managers are now older than 50. And this situation can be explained by both subjective perceptions as well as objective constraints. On the one hand, young people, or let's say at least some of them, are generally reluctant to consider agriculture as a viable livelihood option and associated with low returns, hard work, and low social status. On the other hand, young people wishing to launch activities along agricultural value chains face numerous challenges, in particular inadequate access to land, financial credit, and markets. These challenges are multidimensional and they require interventions at various levels. One of the key elements to meet these challenges is to provide a platform to inspiring and successful role models, as well as giving young people a seat at the decision-making table. And today's event, therefore, pursues precisely this goal as it highlights the work of, on the one hand side, of 3 young parliamentarians, and on the other hand side, 3 young actors of the food systems, chains illustrating their vision towards the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me stop here. I wish you to all of you a successful event today, and we really need young people like you and events like this one to bring about the changes that are required. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, and thank you, Switzerland, in general, for being such a great partner. I think you refer to some of the key initiatives of Switzerland, the Swiss National Committee, but also the Pirates of Trans-Food Nation initiative, and there we will have Ms. Perotti, who will provide us with more details on that. And then I think at the end of your presentation, you made it clear that yes, it's important to provide youth with the tools, but also to provide them with a seat at the decision-making table. And this is important to have them involved in decision-making. And in that respect, when it comes to Switzerland today, we have also Mr. Molina with us from the Swiss Parliament, so the Swiss National Council. So it's very important. So let me know. So thanks again, Ambassador Bowman, for your intervention. Let me now move to our first panelist and young actor from the food system, Miss Louise Mabulo. A chief farmer and entrepreneur, she was featured honorary for Forbes Asia Under 30. Miss Mabulo is a driving force in rethinking food system, empowering farmers, and in weaving climate action and environmental stewardship. She founded the Cacao Project as an initiative that provides farmers in the Philippines with cacao plant seedlings and teaches them how to responsibly and sustainably produce cacao. Ms. Mabulo, first of all, let me congratulate you, of course, on such great achievements. And could you please tell us more about the Cacao Project and how you see parliaments can contribute to projects like yours, and what the benefits would be there for producers and the population in general? Ms. Mabulo, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So once again, hello everyone. My name is Louise. I'm a chef, farmer, and entrepreneur from the Philippines, and I'm working to build sustainable and resilient livelihoods for farmers at the grassroots level across my hometown. And one of our products is this. This is a bar of chocolate. And now for people in the food industry, chocolate has been a topic of debate. Everyone loves it, but it's rooted in many problematic sourcing and consequences. And it's associated to unsustainable agriculture and the alienation of consumers and producers within our food systems. But now imagine if we could probably get this bar of chocolate and make it not only sustainable, but enable us to protect and sustain a community of people from the cycles of storms and super typhoons and biodiversity loss. And what if through a simple, scrumptious snack, we could regenerate the environment and establish disaster resiliency and rethink the food systems and the models that we have within the grassroots level? So that's what the Cacao Project was created to do. And I'll quickly share my screen. So the Cacao Project is on a mission to equip farmers to be better positioned for sustainable success. We began in December 25th of 2016 when Super Typhoon Nok-10 had destroyed over 80% of agricultural land and displaced over 1,000 homes in my town alone. And this meant that for 6 months or up to 5 years to come, our people would be robbed of a stable livelihood and that a means of income even, or the ability to put food on the table, simply because of this one event that happened overnight and laid waste to all of our lives. And the fact is, our farmers have suffered these effects of the typhoon season. Last year, my primarily agricultural town was hit by 3 consecutive super typhoons with 300-kilometer-per-hour winds that hit within 1 week of each other. And the devastation that reigned in the aftermath of this should have been a wake-up call to the vulnerability of our communities and of our livelihoods. And the need for a systems change within the agricultural towns. But unfortunately, we find ourselves sorely under-equipped to tackle these issues and the sheer extent and rootedness of the climate crisis. While especially most of us are focused on survival and rebuilding our homes and livelihoods. So with the Cacao Project, we worked with farmers to provide them with the training and the resources they need to understand their value to the economy, their resources, and their value to the community, their long-term longevity of their livelihoods, and how they can be part of a just transition that produces food to better both people and planet. So we help them diversify their crops help them find a market that are suited to our ecosystems, that can withstand these unprecedented storms. And that crop had happened to be cocoa, which is producing chocolate. And we saw that in the aftermath of typhoons, the crop of cocoa had been what stood fast the most. It had been the one that regenerated the fastest, and it had the largest demand in market. But on the other hand, we also want to help them understand the financial and strategic literacy they need to run their livelihoods, along with the logistical post-harvest systems that come after. And we're not limited to cocoa. We also build diversified integrated agroforests that act as natural wind buffers and regenerates itself over time. I'll quickly stop sharing. But you see, despite agriculture despite being a mostly agricultural country and town, where a large part of our economy is based on farmers and farming, there's this issue that Filipino farmers are still considered a very marginalized group, that they remain to be an extremely vulnerable sector. Now, to give you a little bit of background about why this is important, the average age of farmers in the Philippines is currently around 57 years old, and our previous speaker mentioned that in Africa it's around 60. And with an aging population of farmers and a dwindling youth interest in agriculture, this could mean that we could experience food insecurity in as little as 15 years' time. And on top of that, our world is predicted to require 70% more food by 2050. And conversely, because of the global soil degradation, we're also set to lose harvests and be unable to make sufficient produce in as little as 60 years. To top that off, the Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries to hazards brought about by climate change, according to the Global Peace Index. So in short, the combination of all these problems, the triple planetary crises and these factors combined with cultural stigmas against farmers, means that young people no longer aspire to be a farmer or even to get into green jobs which are associated to agriculture, even though their interventions are greatly needed to save this industry. So not to mention food systems contribute to up to a third of global greenhouse gas emissions. And so much of these issues are blamed upon food systems and agricultural communities, despite the fact that this is what is actually aggravating the cycle. So how do we find solutions? So first of all, what we need is to rethink our approach to agriculture. Agriculture has either been thought of as mass-scale commercial conditions or smallholder farmers that produce very little and can only earn so much. So we need to bring in more holistic approaches that bring back traditional and restorative nature-based solutions and combine it with scientific studies and researches, merging old knowledge and new. And for a long time, the existing practices surrounding agriculture have been driven by demand, by corporations, and even historically by colonization and imperialism. And it's time to think of undoing that through projects like mine or through policy frameworks that better support our farmers with the education and frameworks they need. And now we're realizing that these systems have been so normalized that we'd forgotten that once upon a time, farming was just farming and food was just food. And our ancestors and their traditional practices were more sustainable after all, and that scientists are right. We need to change the way we grow food because the way that it's being done at the moment is problematic to our planet and problematic to future generations. With the Cacao Project, we're enacting that already, enabling grassroots communities to build regenerative agroforests of their own through skills training and proper land management. We see that farmers can save money if they actually created their own fertilizers and pesticides and foliar sprays instead of purchasing their chemical equivalents. And we see that if we take care of our forest cover, our soil and its biodiversity, 10 to 20 years down the line, we would actually be recovering more fruitful harvests instead of suffering from soil acidification. So all this benefits farmers. We just need a just transition into these systems that make it accessible for people to understand, especially people who don't speak English, do not have access to internet, do not have access to these sorts of institutions that have these reports that are readily available online. And we need to note that if agriculture is to be attractive or cool or last into the next decades, it can't be the same agriculture that we've seen in previous generations. Which leads to my second point. We need to disassemble cultural stigmas surrounding food systems and green jobs, especially in developing countries like mine. So in my country, agriculture is perpetuated to be associated to poverty or failure. And that stereotype of the image of farmers is very problematic. And not just that, but it's because it actually helps perpetuate this more and more in policy frameworks where they're underrepresented. In fact, consumers are now so disconnected from our producers that quite a number of people don't realize how their food gets to their table or who the people are that contribute to that process. So you see, agriculture is not limited to toiling in the field. We need designers to help support farmers package their produce. We need marketers who will advertise sustainable, regenerative, and local produce. And we need people in finance to help build funding towards agriculture and food systems to make it more accessible. And we need to educate farmers in how to handle their finances and loans. We also need artists, writers, and entrepreneurs, like many of the people that will be speaking after me, even inventors. And there's a whole world where young people can actually contribute to making an equitable food system so that agriculture can indeed fuel a green and just recovery for our economy. And we've been working on that with the Cacao Project, working with schools, building women farmer associations, and by holding talks on the intersectionality of our food systems. But this wouldn't be possible without collaboration through policymakers and recommendations at the high level that actually get to be trickled down onto the grassroots. Now, lastly, in the rush to look forward, we forget to reach back to our roots. In the numbers and statistics of all these people who are impacted by biodiversity loss, we lose the real human face and real stories of individuals who experience this crisis day by day and who cannot articulate it, that this is their reality, that they experience these typhoons that impact food systems, that cause malnutrition, that cause deficits in ingredients in food because they just simply cannot have that voice to speak up on platforms like these. And I stand here as one of those faces. I speak here for the communities that are not satisfied to simply be statistics and numbers and reports and discussions like these, or unsatisfied that they're portrayed as victims to a global systemic problem. And instead, through my work and through these dialogues, I hope that we can empower them to be agents of change and partners and stewards of creation, because the future that we will build together is the future that we will truly deserve. And if we build a better world, we need to build biodiverse food systems. We need more green landscapes so children can grow up to value and understand them and understand where our food comes from. So now is the time for accountability in our landscapes. And now is the time to demand and pass policies that protect the communities who restore our land, our soil, our biodiversity, and create systemic changes that address the root of the issues that we face. And build solutions tailor-fit that are unique to these landscapes and empower communities as actors and gatekeepers and holders of solutions, and not just as beneficiaries to short-term aid, especially in the aftermath of typhoons or droughts. And we need to recognize that someday all businesses, all logistics, and food systems will need to transition into restoration or sustainability, or either risk getting left behind or not having a future in the food system at all. So with this taking place at the onset of the decade of restoration, and soon after actually a lot of the working groups at the Youth for Climate debate in anticipation of pre-COP, I sincerely expect that through the discussions laid out here, that new ground can be broken for the conservation and preservation of these communities, of their culture and biodiversity, and through the food systems that people will be fueled to act as stewards to creation and hold accountability for our well-being and for the future of our planet. So thank you very much. That's all from me, and handing the floor back to you, Dominique.
Thank you very much, Louise, for such a great and I would say passionate intervention, reminding us of the increasing vulnerability of the communities to extreme events and climate change, but also of these extreme events as an opportunity to build back better, with a special role for the youth, and I would say as part of a whole of society effort, which you described very well. So thank you very much, Louise. Before giving the floor to Mr. Molina, I would like to ask the speaker to try to not to extend too long, to be too long in their intervention, and to try to be to aim for 5 minutes, possibly. Then if you extend a little, it's okay. But I mean, aim for 5 minutes, please. So let me now go to Mr. Fabian Molina, who is a parliamentarian, member of the National Council of Switzerland since 2018. He's also a member of the Foreign Policy Committee, and before that he was a member of the Grand Conseil of the Canton de Zurich, and he's president of Swiss Aid Zurich since 2017 and was a trade union secretary of UNIA. Mr. Molina, as a politician, you have advocated social improvement that benefits the entire population and have raised the attention of national and international media. You also took a leading role in the popular initiative named Stop Speculation on Food Crops, And could you please tell us how you see the role of parliamentarians in transforming food systems in Switzerland and globally? What main issues and challenges do you envisage? The floor is yours, Mr. Molina. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, as already mentioned, the UN Sustainable Food System Summit, which took place on 23rd and 24th September, has mobilized many actors around the topic of sustainable food value chains. And it has brought forward coalitions which are meant to further sustainable food systems by 2030 to fulfill SDGs. Fundamentally, however, this summit has been largely uncritical vis-à-vis the current state of food systems, and more especially why we came to this point of broken food systems in the first place. Only through such an honest assessment, however, we can change can take place. Only then we can put action and investment to an actual use. The other weak point of the summit and our current multilateral system on food is that because we refuse to do our own homework of an honest critical assessment regarding the past 70 years of trying to fix food systems, we completely lack guidance on what not to do, how not to repeat mistakes from the past. So allow me please, in attempt to bring these two things together, to have a closer look at how we could do it better and to establish not to fix broken food systems, and give you some thoughts on that together with you here. First, we should not disown those most affected by hunger, malnutrition, and the pollution of natural resources of their rights. Rather, we must strengthen the fulfillment of the fundamental rights of these groups of people, of these families and these children. The UN Food System Summit should have made human rights in food system its stronghold. People such as peasants and small-scale family farmers, herders, fisher folk, agricultural laborers, indigenous people, but also urban poor, and among them most especially women and children, should benefit from a strong signal that the UN intends to strengthen the right to food together with the implementation of UNDROP and UNDRIP declarations. These vulnerable groups should finally get somewhere if UN experts were allowed to do their job and step on the toes of our governments, of private sector actors and NGOs in doing a thorough and regular follow-up on the implementation of these rights by stakeholders in food systems. This can be done through legitimate existing bodies, and these topics, such as the high-level panel of experts and the Committee on World Food Security, together with the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, and the mechanisms and processes around the UNDRIP and the UNDROP implementation. What we certainly should not be doing is accept that the UN is becoming a mere conveyor of multi-stakeholderism. Second, we should not accept partnerships between UN bodies and industries which add to the problem of polluted natural resources rather than being part of the solution. We are doing this in accepting the partnership of FAO and CropLife International, for instance, and we should not be applauding that. We should rather support the UN in keeping independent from private sector lobbies and be strong guiding force towards sustainability. We can do this. We can do it by opposing such alliances and by maintaining and honoring our government's funding commitments to the UN and its bodies. Third, we should not stand in the way of small-scale food producers, including women farmers who nourish their communities with healthy and diversified foods, which stem from carefully selected and multiplied farmer seeds. However, we do that, we knowingly stand in the way when we back patents on food and restrictive seeds and variety protection policies such as UPOF 91 and prohibit farmers from selecting, multiplying, exchanging, and locally selling seeds. Fourth, ladies and gentlemen, we should not back programs and projects be in be it through the UN or other stakeholders who do not deliver on the bottom-up needs assessments of the local populations themselves. But we are currently not ready enough to change course on this. We have 70 years history of top-down policymaking in agriculture and food system, overlooking that locals should actually want to do themselves. The latest IFAD Rural Development Report honestly takes up those shortcomings, stating, I quote, "A focus on producing high-calorie grain has pushed up yields and cut prices of staple foods. The cost, food waste, malnutrition, and obesity, and environmental degradation." End of quote. Yes, we have been going around preaching that we need to feed people, when instead we should have built our interventions around what farmer and rural communities need to nourish people with diverse and healthy foods. The lead of us to fifth, we should not support intervention based on high-tech solutions or powerful input suppliers and food buyers that will look our farmers in. We are not talking about a watch or a mobile phone here. We are talking about food. For farmers to be able to nourish us today and tomorrow under increasingly harsh circumstances, we have already been talking about that, they need sound training in agroecological agriculture, which provides them with the maximum amount of autonomy on their farms. They need to maintain a high level of biodiversity on site thanks to agroecology. Unconventional approaches such as agroecology allows farmers to close nutrient cycles and work without insecticides and herbicides while producing many different foods at once they can sell throughout the year. Farmers are entrepreneurs and they need to be able to dispose of their productive means. They need to be free to choose their suppliers and buyers carefully. We should not lock them into unfair and polluting value chains that kept them trapped in poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, a world where 3 billion suffer from undernutrition, malnutrition, or overweight and related diseases, food systems represent a leverage point for successful public health policies, successful agricultural policies, effective gender policies, and policies to maintain vibrant rural and urban landscape. They also are so powerful foundation for economic development. However, this time around, we need to get things right. The summit should have led us there. Now it is up to legitimate existing bodies such as the UN and its member states to insist on getting it right. However, they will have little incentives to tackle many of these issues, including my own government, if fresh young thinkers like the ones today here do not voice these issues loud and clear, such as I try to do right now, and ask for change, real change, to achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Molina, for such thought-provoking remarks, calling for critical review of the food systems, and I would say, among many things you said, reminding of the importance of indeed bottom-up approaches, which are indeed critical to move forward. Let me now move to our next speaker, and I will give the floor to Mr. Olivier Flamand-Lapointe from the Graduate Institute Student Association in Geneva. And Mr. Flamand-Lapointe is one of the top 100 leaders of tomorrow at the 50th St. Gallen Symposium, with a degree in Public Affairs and International Relations. Mr. Flamand-Lapointe carried out research project on the impacts of climate change on the right of people of African descent. He finishes this year's master in agroecological transformation in sub-Saharan city region food systems. Mr. Flamand-Lapointe, you represent youth in the academia, Could you please tell us the prevalent thinking in your community on the needed evolution of food systems? How do you see the future of these food systems? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Let me first share my screen. Right. You should be able to see it by now. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm really pleased to represent the Environmental Committee and the Student Association from the Graduate Institute. My name is Olivier. I'm from Montreal in Canada, and I'm a master's student in development studies. I will be graduating soon, actually. I just finished my thesis yesterday on agroecology. And as you can see, I'm passionate about food and agriculture. I spent the last year researching on that topic. And last spring, I had the chance to, the opportunity to participate in the St. Gallen Symposium, whereas I wrote an essay on the topic of trust. And I asked myself, how can we rebuild trust between consumers and their food? So that's the topic I will discuss with you today. During this essay, I first had to acknowledge three things. First, that there's a growing distance between us and our plates, and that labels and certifications that companies try to put forward to increase the trust between us and our food is not really effective. And that in parallel, there's an urban and rural divide that is fueled by urbanization. You have a food demand that is rising in cities, and at the same time, rural areas are slowly declining. There's a lack of economic opportunities and good infrastructures there. So there's a gap that is dividing two populations, urban consumers and rural producers. And I tried to come up with a solution to try to tackle these issues. And it entails to create local and short supply chains in and around cities. So to try to bridge those gaps with city region food systems. So I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. I used a concept that is already employed by organizations like the FAO and in research in general. But I tried to come up with the most effective strategies in my views to try to scale up this kind of solution. And I will present them briefly here, 4 strategies to try to redesign our food industry from something that is global to a more local food system. The first strategy that I suggested is to create local participatory governance structures. And it kind of comes back to what my previous colleagues just mentioned. We have to build up bottom-up policy making and local-based solutions by trying to include every stakeholder from the food system. And that means governments, companies, but also consumers and producers, and of course, youth in the process. And that would increase the transparency of the industry and also increase the knowledge and the trust between all these stakeholders. Secondly, I suggested that the food industry should embrace more vertical expansion strategies. That means to create a more decentralized food industry by creating small food hubs around cities where all part of the supply chains are present, from the production that is already there, but also by creating processing infrastructures. So it would create shorter supply chains and reduce the transports between rural areas and the cities. And also it would create more freshness for products and a better traceability for food safety in the process. Thirdly is the digitalization of short supply chains. That is to use e-commerce to promote sustainable and local produce. because we know people in general don't trust the food industry, but they do trust producers. So by increasing the connection between consumers and producers through digitalization, it would also be a more scalable and more large-scale solution compared to, for instance, food markets in the city. And lastly, the fourth strategy is it's a bit boring, but it's essential. We need to fund the transition. We need governments, public money to support private investments, to finance these local-based solutions, and to invest more in sustainable farming. And meanwhile, to disinvest from the large-scale and industrial farming that is harming our planet. Thank you. That was all for me. Looking forward to pursue the discussion with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flamand-Lapointe, for sharing your vision and the elements of that vision, including local participatory governance structure, vertical expansion, digitalization, and what you said is boring, but it's key is the funding, of course, of the transition. So thank you for that. Let me now move to the Honorable Neema Luganjira, who is our next speaker and who is a member of the Parliament of Tanzania, where she sits in two parliamentarian standing committee on social services and community development and on HIV, TB, and drugs. Ms. Luganjira was a founding chairperson of the Parliamentary Caucus on Food Safety, and she also continues to serve as the founder of and executive director of Agri-Amani Foundation, an NGO focused on adding value to ending malnutrition efforts in Tanzania. Honorable Luganjira, you have been an important actor in transforming food system for a long time. What do you see as the role of partnership in the promotion of food security and nutrition, and what role do you see for the parliaments in these efforts? The floor is yours, madam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much for the opportunity. As introduced, my name is Neema Luganjira, and I'm in Tanzania. Basically, from what I envision is that in order for us to achieve improved and strengthened food systems, we need to take an holistic approach. And I agree with the speakers that came before me in the sense that it's very important to include, the local communities in these discussions. So I can just take a quick example. What we do at Agri-Amani Foundation is we try and have interventions at community level, and the findings that we get at community level, the challenges that we get, we then take them up on the side of advocacy, because then our advocacy is informed by what's on the ground. And I think it's very important as parliamentarians to get that capacity building of evidence-based, policy advocacy. And this is where youth and other players become very important. Now, when we talk about the youth, I believe that, with COVID-19, with climate change issues, with economic shocks, we've seen that our food systems are very vulnerable. And in order to strengthen our food systems, we need to take a sustainable approach. And to do that, we need to include the youth. Youth need to be central of our discussion. And I totally agree with other speakers before me in terms of the population size of the youth. I can just give a quick example. Here in Tanzania, the World Bank did a study, and in 1990, we had about 4.4 million youth in 1990. By 2010, that number doubled to 8.1 million. And it's estimated that, by 2020, 2021, there will be about 11 million youth in Tanzania. And by 2030, about 15 million. That's out of 60 million, average of 60 million right now. So we can already see that, youth have to be brought to the table. We need to include ideas and suggestions and experiences from the youth. But not only that, I'm seeing that our food systems is an opportunity to create employment. Because, for example, in Tanzania, every year we have about 700,000 to 800,000 graduates, but the public sector can only employ between 80,000 to 90,000. So you can see a good number of youth remain unemployed, and unemployment amongst youth is a challenge not only in Tanzania, in other developing countries. But there is a unique opportunity in this agriculture sector to create, on one side, employment, but also to create self-employment. So I personally highly commend FAO to come up with this World Food Forum that brings together youth and parliamentarians on the table. And what I foresee is to first, I think the things that I would highly recommend is to first look at our rural food systems and ensure that our rural food systems also, respond to the needs of the rural areas, because up until now, the main focus of rural food systems seems to be to feed and strengthen urban food systems. So it shouldn't be to the detriment, of the nutrition value of the rural food systems. But second is to also look at the issue of anemia. We all know a large percentage of smallholder farmers are women, women farmers. And we know that with high anemia rates, also productivity reduces. But we also know that, anemia in adolescent girls is very high. And all of that leads to also things like maternal mortality, etc. So I think with the food systems, you can also strengthen the diversified diets. And this is where youth can become very good champions. I have a very small example we did in a region in Kagera, which is in Lake Victoria region, whereby we started a school vegetable garden in one school, and 45 adolescents were part of that pilot. Out of the 45, 15 adolescents started vegetable gardens at their home. And immediately it led to dietary variety at the household, but also entrepreneurship skills for the youth. So you can see the opportunity and the sheer magnitude of that, the power that youth have. First, to advocate for policy change, but also to even advocate and champion food habits from household level to communities. And to sum up, I think one of the biggest things that we need to look at the future is, as this event is rightly doing, is to make sure that parliamentarians work closely with the youth as one team. Youth need to be in touch with parliamentarians, and parliamentarians need to be in touch with the youth. So I highly commend platform events such as this one, and perhaps this is one of the things that can be taken forward, is to see how can we engage more youth on food systems, youth in agri-food systems, and linking them with parliamentarians, policymakers, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nima Lugangira, for your intervention, for indeed calling for holistic approach, for community involvement, and for, your point on changing the role of the food system to respond to the needs of the rural area, and to see the rural area as rural area, and calling for indeed this increased interaction between the youth and parliamentarians, which is really at the center of the discussion today. So thank you, Madam. Let me now move to Ms. Perotti, Ms. Alessa Perotti, who studied food science at ETH Zurich, where she developed a method to estimate the true cost of food and apply it to Swiss food system in the context of her master thesis. She is passionate about food system transformation, and she is a Bites of Transformation young transformer. Alessa is actively involved in increasing awareness on true cost of food in Switzerland. Ms. Perotti, food systems encompass not only the production of food, but all other related activities. And it is imperative that all move together to feed a growing global population. How do you see the improvement in food system can be made to guarantee achievements of the 2030 agenda? The floor is yours, Mr. Oti.
Thank you very much. You actually just said a lot of the things that I wanted to say in the introduction. But yeah, so I just finished my master's last year, and I'm part of this Bites of Transformation group that also Mr. Baumann talked about. So first, I'm going to quickly share a bit more about Bites of Transformation and our vision for a sustainable food system, and then dive into the true cost of food topic that you also just mentioned, which we think is one of the key or a big opportunity to move towards the sustainable food system. So Bites of Transformation is a group of young people from a lot of different parts of the world who is supported by the Swiss government. And we were actually also recognized as an independent dialogue and for the summit. And one of our major outcomes is this manifesto that was already mentioned as well. So basically a declaration of our vision and intention co-created by us as a group that reflects our vision of a transformed food system and system that is sustainable, equitable, resilient, healthy, diverse, transparent, unifying, interconnected, and empowering, to take just a few adjectives, where food is not a commodity anymore. And one of the ways we think that we can move into this direction is by firstly understanding the true cost of food, so the impact of food on a lot of different areas important to sustainable development, and then applying this knowledge to the entire value chain to change production and consumption practices in an informed and targeted way. So this true cost of food thing, I'm now going to just quickly share a bit about my thesis for those of you who haven't heard of it before. It's really a topic that has been gaining momentum now and is also was also discussed at the summit, and I'll just explain it very quickly. And then if you're interested in learning more, of course, I'm happy to share more information or my thesis or anything, but we only have a little bit of time now. So just a very high level intro at this point. So the true cost of food is really all costs and benefits actually created by a product over its life cycle. And it's derived by using true cost accounting. So accounting for environmental, social, economic, animal welfare costs created by that product. And the true cost of a product is what you get from adding these external, so they're called external costs or benefits, to what we currently pay in store for products. And that is very important to understand, because as we are all aware, the food system is really impacting key areas of sustainable development, mostly negatively. And it's therefore really also a huge opportunity to understand how we can shift this and improve this to build a food system that really is a pillar of sustainable development. Because right now, a lot of these costs, so for example, health costs of unhealthy diets, or the cost of biodiversity loss, or animal welfare costs, and not to mention, of course, climate change, or even, of course, also all the topics around livelihoods. So these are all currently not accounted for in food prices. And if we start understanding those better, we can start building a system that is really, has coherent and empowering and sustainable policies along the whole value chain. So a method to measure these things doesn't really exist yet. I've mentioned true cost accounting, which is a step into the direction, but it mostly focuses on environmental impacts and not really on other very important topics, such as the livelihoods topic or the health topic. So the discussion that is going on currently is how do we need to build some kind of language to actually commonly agree on to have a basis for food system transformation changes. And this is exactly what I did in my thesis. I tried to produce a first holistic methodology that covers food system impacts, not only in the environmental spheres where we already know a lot about, but also on livelihoods, human health, animal welfare. It's fair to say that the true I applied it to the Swiss food system, and it's very fair to say that the true cost of the Swiss food system is much higher than what we spend in store. I'm not going to go deeper into this now, but as I said, very happy to share more at a different point in time, or even the thesis itself. But really one of the main outcomes of this whole thesis, and also what influenced our work in Bites of Transformation, is realizing that we need to reduce these external costs of the food system, both internationally as well as in Switzerland. And the first step, which is creating such a common language to, compare, measure progress, etc., is really a huge opportunity to create a sustainable food system. And for example, also show the incredible benefit of regenerative agricultural systems that Louise mentioned earlier. And to really build a food system where sustainable decisions become the default along the entire value chain. So that's a very short intro into the true cost of food topic. I know this was a lot, but maybe to summarize. So my vision of a sustainable food system is one where food prices reflect the true cost and benefits of their products, and where, because of that, food systems really are pillars of sustainable development. And as you can imagine, policies are going to be key to build a food system based on true cost transparency. So both I and the whole Bites of Transformation group would love to understand how we can together shape this future. And specifically also in collaboration with the young parliamentarians, who have much more access into politics, which we don't have at this point. And a final comment, something that was motivating but also raises questions, specifically also to the Swiss here. So as you know, a lot of countries prepared a pathway for food system transformation. And the one that Switzerland prepared, and I'm quoting this, says the following, or includes the following paragraph. The Confederation creates favorable, transparent, and efficient framework conditions for sustainable food systems throughout the value chain, from agricultural production through to consumption. It promotes the internalization of external costs and transparency regarding the origin and production methods of food. In doing so, it is especially mindful of environmental impacts, social circumstances, and animal welfare conditions. So this, of course, and I'm not quoting anymore now, this is a good first step, and actually goes into the right direction. It mentions especially also the social circumstances and animal welfare, in addition to what we mostly already know. And here comes the question. So how can we as youth support this process and make sure it does result in the sustainable and equitable food system we are striving towards? How can we help the parliamentarians and make sure that we are, sufficiently heard in this process, both in Switzerland and beyond, in these next steps of food system transformation? It's my question to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perotti. And I think, well, part of the answer is certainly in the thesis that you have done, and which I think you have encouraged all of us to look at the true cost of food, which I think it's also a role to provide evidence for decision making. And I think you are, with your thesis, you are definitely contributing to that. So thank you very much. Let me now move to our colleagues, Kazuki Kitaoka and Emma Restaino, and they will provide us with a first-hand update of the World Food Forum and the activities that have taken place in the last couple of days. And as you have heard, today is the last day of the event, and so it will be very interesting to hear from them. Kazuki is the manager of the World Food Forum and head of outreach and reporting unit and reporting at FAO. And Ms. Restaino is Youth Action Co-leader at World Food Forum and parliamentary and council affairs consultant at FAO. Kazuki and Emma, first of all, congratulations for the World Food Forum and all the discussions that have taken place so far. And I think we'd like now to hear from you what are the main messages that start to come out and the activities that have taken place. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dominique, for giving us the floor. So I believe Kazuki is stuck in production this morning, so I will be speaking on behalf of both of us. I wanted also to thank the LOG team for inviting us to this event. So the World Food Forum, as you mentioned, is on the last day. And overall, I think we have been really delighted to see the enthusiasm of all the organizers and all the participants who have been joining from different regions, from different countries. We also saw a lot of different backgrounds for the people who have joined, and really a wide variety of ages. Yesterday, we had high school and secondary school students, and then we have older people and also, university students. So it was really varied and so interesting to exchange with all these participants who are willing to engage and to take part in this space that the World Food Forum created. Because there has been so many things going on in the past 4 days, which a lot of it will be available on our YouTube or on the UN Web TV, so you can rewatch what you've missed. But I will just highlight a few sessions and a few examples of what happened. So on Friday, we had a masterclass on International Coffee Day, and we also had a great pre-COP26 event that was bringing intergenerational exchanges between young activists and also senior speakers from Rabobank and from the Netherlands Permanent Representation to the Rome-based agencies. It was truly an inspiring event. We also had a very inspiring opening sessions that I hope some of you joined, with leaders, artists, youth leaders that joined. And then after that, on Monday, the Youth Action Assembly was launched. Yesterday, discussions about the draft texts and the creation of a youth mechanism were started, and as well as discussions on a compendium of action that is being prepared by our youth leaders. And we were so happy to see that young participants who joined the World Food Forum were willing to be engaged in the long term in this mechanism, as well as willing to collaborate and contribute to the Youth Action Compendium. So that is something still in progress today. You can still join the Youth Action Assembly, but this is looking good for the closing ceremony, and really something exceptional on the move. Then two last things that I want to mention. The Young Farmers Roundtable was kicked off yesterday as well, with farmers from all around the world, more than 100 young farmers connected. And we had really an overview of farming practices and good practices from different regions, from Benin, from India, from Haiti. It was very interesting, and the second part of the discussion will be today. And last, I wanted to also mention all our side events. This event is also one of them. Overall, there's more than 20, and we have seen a lot of creativity in the content. There was an ideal burger challenge with students yesterday. There was a discussion on Nepali food systems, a lot of discussion with parliamentarians, which were very inspiring. For me and for, I think, a part of our team, the key takeaway might be that we see the interest. We see the interest of youth, but we also see the interest of parliamentarians, of speakers, of people in high places, and also senior professionals to engage with youth and to create this space. And as Ms. Lugangira said yesterday and also today, she's so interested to having this discussion and making this something that will last. So I think there is this desire, and the World Food Forum flagship event, first edition, was the way to confirm it. And now we have many opportunities to move forward. And my last words will be that there's a lot of other sessions today, so you can check out the agenda still, join our sessions, and join the closing ceremony this afternoon. Thank you very much for giving us the floor.
Thank you very much, Emma, for this update on what has been indeed a very rich World Food Forum, which continues today with still a number of very important sessions, but which, of course, is a movement. will continue forward and will generate a lot of intense discussion, including between youth and parliamentarians. Unfortunately, we will not have time for a Q&A session because the time is running, but we just posted an email address on the chat box where you are all invited to put your follow-up questions, and we will endeavor to make sure this is transmitted to the concerned colleagues and provide you with the answers. So thank you. Now let me move to the closing remarks, and we are very fortunate to have the contribution of Ms. Marcela Villarreal, the Director of the FAO Partnership and UN Collaboration Division. Marcela has a long and very interesting career at FAO, where she has been leading the organization work with non-state actors, leading capacity development, land tenure, South-South cooperation, many different aspects she has been dealing with. And I would like now to give the floor to Marcela, and we'd like to know your views on the discussion of today. Marcela, as you are aware, as you are responsible for FAO initiatives towards Parliament, especially parliamentary arrangements that promote food security and nutrition, being the major example of the parliamentary front against hunger in Latin America and the Caribbean, for example. We would like to hear a few words from you regarding FAO's work with parliamentarians. Marcela, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dominique, and thank you very much to all of the speakers. It's been such an interesting session, full of ideas, of new ways for the future. Very, very interesting. Thanks to all. Yes, indeed, Dominique, the Parliamentary Fronts Against Hunger started in 2009, so a long time ago already in Latin America, whereby the idea was to bring parliamentarians together from across the political spectrum to be able to join efforts in one common goal, which was the fight against hunger. And then we expanded that for all forms of malnutrition, not only hunger. But that was a very, very successful initiative. And then we decided to expand this initiative also throughout the world. Today, and also thanks to some of those parliamentarians in Latin America, which we flew to, for example, the Pan-African Parliament. In no time, they shared their experience, helped to build a Pan-African Parliament Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition. We flew some other parliamentarians from Latin America to the European Parliament, and we created an alliance against hunger and malnutrition in the European Parliament. This is more than South-South collaboration. This would be South-North collaboration. And so we have been able to support parliamentary alliances against hunger and malnutrition throughout the world, both at regional level and national level. So regional level, we have the parliamentary bodies, like, for example, the Parlatino, which is the parliament for the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean, the Pan-African Parliament. So the work with the regional bodies is FAO supports them to create framework laws. And of course, framework laws are very useful afterwards for national parliaments to be able to adapt them to the national context and to already have a good basis to start on some kind of legislative project. So we started out with framework laws on things like family farming, on small-scale fishing, and so on. So today we count with more than 35 laws, national laws that have been already passed by national parliaments with FAO's technical assistance. And why do we provide technical assistance? Because those of you who are parliamentarians, you know, not all parliamentarians are real experts in all of these topics. They represent important segments of the population, but they're not necessarily experts, like, for example, what is the impact of climate change on food security, things like that. And so FAO supports national, sub-regional, and regional parliaments in this way. We provide technical assistance, we provide data, we also provide the forums where people can exchange experience. And so whatever has been a good parliamentary initiative in a country, in X country, will be able to share that with other regions or with other countries in the same region. And that has been a very, very fertile ground for promoting legal frameworks, which, as we know, are necessary for development. We have development targets, like all throughout the development agenda, the SDGs, but then how do we convert those in reality? And we have to understand what legal frameworks are necessary for that, and FAO will support the parliaments to create those legal frameworks, like, for example, to ensure zero hunger. We have in the 35 laws that have been already approved, there are laws for school feeding, for example, laws against food loss and waste, laws that will help the small-scale fishers be more productive, and so on. We have a range of different kinds of laws that have been done with FAO's support in terms of what I already mentioned, technical assistance, also capacity development for parliamentarians and the staff of parliamentarians. And we have, why are we working with parliaments? Well, you all know the roles of parliaments are fundamental. So on the one hand, political will. Without political will, we would never get where we are in terms of advances in thinking, in terms of climate change, in terms of food insecurity. We know that from all of the countries that were able to meet as the Millennium Development Goals, for those of you who remember the goals before the current agenda of the 2030, those were the Millennium Development Goals. Our first goal there was to cut hunger by half. And there were more than 72 countries worldwide who were able to meet the goal. They actually cut hunger by half or more than half. And what did they all have in common? Countries that were rich or poor, it's political will. Political will, investing resources, both human and monetary, into arriving at those good those outcomes. Of course, parliaments, obviously, they decide on budgets. Without the budgets, you're not going anywhere in terms of development outcomes. The parliaments also, of course, hold governments accountable. They have an oversight role, and that's also very, very fundamental and very importantly, voice. Throughout today, many of you have mentioned how important it is to have voice. So we're supporting young parliamentarians' voices in parliaments throughout the world. We're equipping them with the data, the information, the lessons learned from other regions, so that their role can be very effective. And you've seen it today, the passion that you put into this work is more than evident, but not only the passion, the good ideas, the innovations, the Cacao Project that we heard about, the new thinking around the rural food systems and their interactions between rural and urban areas, the agroecology, the need to have more trust between consumers and food, so many things. It's impossible to touch upon all of them, but they all came out today very, very nicely. The role of young parliamentarians is fundamental. Do we really want to transform food systems for the future so that they are sustainable, so that the healthy food can be affordable, so they are more resilient? Do we really want that? Well, without youth, but also without young parliamentarians, I think that is not going to be possible. So I think we have a very fertile ground for collaboration. FAO is here ready to take the knowledge that we've heard today, the true cost of food, for example, to convert it into what the parliamentarians and their staff need in terms of knowledge, in terms of data, in order for them to be able to have a very productive activity in creating those legal frameworks that will set the foundations for all of us to be able to get closer to our goal of zero hunger by 2030. So thanks very, very much to all of you. It's been a really fantastic session.
Thank you so much, Marcela, for your remarks, for reminding us of the importance indeed of political will This is critical. Without political will, it's very difficult to progress. And for highlighting FAO's work in support of parliaments and parliamentary work, and by indeed linking evidence to policy making, to policy decision, I think this is definitely a key role for FAO. Before I say a few remarks at the end, I would like really to briefly give the floor to Ms. Nima Lugangira, who wants to come back talking of political will. Madam, you have the floor for a couple of brief remarks, please. You are muted. You are muted.
I apologize. Thank you so much. I think listening to Dr. Marcella kind of triggered my need to come back. So just very quickly, I wanted to say that I highly commend the work that FAO is doing in providing the capacity building to parliamentarians in not only preparing the different legislative, but also providing them with evidence-based evidence so that we can do evidence-based advocacy. So that's one of the things that perhaps we can follow up on, because I even see that us parliamentarians in Tanzania would highly benefit from such an initiative. Secondly, is during my first 7-8 months or so as a member of parliament, I've been able to establish a parliamentary caucus on food safety. So I think that's also an area whereby perhaps FAO can provide us the necessary capacity and to ensure that, you know, in everything that we're doing, food needs to be safe along the entire value chain. So that's another area that I wanted to touch on. And the third item is that to reaffirm my commitment and readiness to, you know, of bringing together youth and parliamentarians. And that's something that we've already discussed with Emma, and I think we'll carry forward with it. And I look very much forward to working with FAO World Food Forum. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And Mr. Dominic, thank you very much again for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lugangira. Thank you very much. This political will indeed is critical. The link between the grassroots and the policy making and the parliament is indeed so important. Now, I would like really to thank all our speakers today for sharing their views, and which I would like really the very rich dialogue that has taken place and the views that have been shared has really created a huge appetite to engage more. So I think the World Food Forum should really be seen as a starting point of many things that will take place in the future, and certainly for increased opportunities for engagement between actors in the food system and parliamentarians will be a key element. I would like to also thank the participants, those who followed on the webcast that will be available, of course, on our website, in the FAO website. And I would like, of course, to thank the FAO youth committees and all those in the FAO Geneva office who contributed to organize this side event, and beyond that, of course, who contributed to the organization of the World Food Forum, which, as was said, continues today. We'll have again important sessions that will take place today, but then which is really a true movement that will continue with, of course, a key role being played by the FAO youth committees and its partners. So with that, again, thank you very much for being with us today, and I will wish you all the very best in your endeavors. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.